Okay, ready to dive in. You brought us this children's book, Grammy Spoon. It's about a tough topic, death, seen through the eyes of this kid, Jenny.
What I find really interesting is how how the story steers clear of anything religious or spiritual, no explanations like that. It's just about the raw emotions, the impact of death on a young mind.
Yeah, right away, we're in this world of childhood games, Red Rover, tag, all that. The author really makes you feel that energy, the carefree world of kids.
And that makes the shift even more powerful, right? Like, all that's going on, then suddenly, boom, Jenny overhears that her Grammy died. It's like everything changes in an instant.
And the author doesn't just say Jenny was sad. It's like we feel it with her. The hot face, her chest tightening up.
And then she tries to stop her friends from playing. Their happiness just doesn't compute with how she's feeling. It's this really common thing for kids. They get sadness, but the foreverness of death, that's much harder.
Her brother, Steve, he's different. He starts asking all these practical questions like, what happens after you die? Where do we go to visit Grammys now?
Right. It shows how differently kids handle things. Jenny's trying to pretend it's not happening, even pretending Grammy's still alive, while Steve's looking for concrete answers.
I loved how the author brings in all these sensory details about Grammy's house. The powder smell, how soft her hugs were, that quiet, cool feeling of her house. Even like really specific things, like how she made breakfast, runny eggs, toast cut into triangles.
Oh, absolutely. Those details aren't just thrown in there. It's all about how powerful our senses are for memory. For Jenny, those things become a way to hold on to the past, to connect with her grief and her love for Grammy.
Speaking of holding on, the book also goes into the funeral preparations. And it's amazing how something like what to wear becomes this huge thing for Jenny.
Totally. And it's Steve, the practical one, who solves it. Just a flower pinned on her dress. But it works. Kids often find comfort in simple solutions like that.
There's also this moment where Jenny sees her parents laughing and she just can't understand it. Like, how can they be anything but sad? It shows that disconnect between how kids and adults handle grief.
Then there's that drive through the desert to get to Grammy's house. All that empty space. It's like a visual metaphor for what's going on inside Jenny.
Even during the drive, the author throws in these tiny, amazing details. The smell of orange groves, lines drawn in the sand, even a little lizard they see.
That lizard, that's a key moment. Jenny wonders if it feels lost, too. It's like she's trying to make sense of this huge thing, death, by relating it to the world around her.
And then we get to the funeral itself. Everything feels so serious, somber, the bell ringing slowly, no one laughing. It's a lot for a kid to take in.
Right. While the adults are finding meaning in the funeral rituals, Jenny doesn't get it. What helps her is something simple, holding her brother's hand. It's like this little island of comfort in the middle of all that grown-up emotion.
It's interesting. Even though she doesn't understand the funeral, she decides to clean Grammy's kitchen. Seems like a small thing, but it really struck me.
It's not just cleaning. It's about Jenny taking action, finding a way to deal with her grief. By making Grammy's kitchen clean and orderly again, it's like she's taking back some control in a situation that feels totally out of her hands.
And then that incredibly touching scene at the end. Aunt Barbara gives Jenny Grammy's special spoon. Not just any spoon, but one that's tied to all these memories.
That spoon becomes like a symbol, doesn't it? A link to the past. It shows how even when someone's gone, we find ways to hold on to them, make their memory a part of us. That spoon, it's not just a spoon, is it? It's like, it stands for so much more. Grammy's love, the family history.
Yeah. Like Jenny's holding a piece of her grandmother, even though she's gone. Makes me think about how families pass down stories, traditions.
It is like a chain, isn't it? And when someone dies, it feels like a link is broken.
Maybe objects, rituals that can help us make new connections, ways to remember, to honor the people who came before us.
Creating a memory that lives on. And it connects with people no matter what they believe about death. This book, it's interesting how it doesn't get into specific religions or anything.
Right. It's more about just the human experience of grief. Makes it more universal, I think.
Lets people bring their own belief to it. Doesn't tell you what happens after you die, just how we deal with the loss.
And everybody grieves so differently, there's no right way.
Exactly. The book shows that with Jenny and Steve. Same loss, but they react totally differently.
Jenny's in denial, trying to minimize it. Steve wants facts, answers.
Both are valid. It's about finding what works for you, what helps you process all those mixed up emotions.
And sometimes it's just letting yourself feel them. The sadness, the confusion, whatever it is, no judgment.
One of the big takeaways from this book is that it's okay to grieve your own way. And the author, their own childhood, it sounds like death was a big part of it, both personally and like in the world at large.
They mentioned the Vietnam War, the Cold War, all that fear of nuclear attack. It was a pretty heavy time.
Makes you think about how that shapes a generation's view of death. You know, how fragile life is.
It does seem like it gave the author this awareness of that and how important it is to appreciate the time we have with loved ones.
It is a reminder. Life is precious and we never know what's going to happen, especially now with everything going on in the world.
Kids today, they're growing up with death and loss, being more present, it seems like. News, social media, everything.
And it's our job as adults to give them a safe place to talk about it, to ask questions, deal with those heavy emotions.
Books like Grammy Spoon can help. They give kids a way to understand grief, to see that all those feelings are normal, and that it's okay to ask for help.
They remind us that even when someone dies, there's still beauty, still meaning in life.
And those connections, those memories we have, they stay with us.
Sometimes it's the simplest things that help us hold on to them. A spoon, a photo, a letter.
They become these like containers for love, for memory.
It's about finding those things that remind us of the people we've lost, even though they're not physically here anymore.
Before we go on, I want to go back to rituals for a sec. The book shows the funeral, and Jenny doesn't really get it, but it means a lot to the adults. What do you think about rituals in grief?
Rituals can give you some structure, some comfort. When everything feels so chaotic, you know, they can be a way to express how you're feeling, to honor the person who died, to connect with other people who are grieving too.
That connection, that's so key. Rituals create a shared experience so people don't feel so alone.
They can also give you a sense of closure, a way to like mark that transition from life to death.
And it's not just funerals. People have their own personal rituals. Visiting a grave, lighting a candle, listening to a song, cooking a certain meal. Those can be just as meaningful.
Exactly. It's about what works for you, what helps you remember the person in a way that feels right.
There's no one right way to do rituals.
The important thing is that they give you comfort, connection, and a sense of meaning when you've lost someone.
As we've been talking about this book, I keep thinking about the author's note, how they said death was always around when they were a kid. And they mentioned specific things that happened back then that shaped how they saw death. I wonder, are there parallels between that and the world today?
That is interesting. The events might be different, but yeah, I think there are similarities. We live in a time with a lot of anxiety, uncertainty, pandemics, climate change, politics, the economy.
And all that filters down to kids, too. They're bombarded with news, information, especially on social media. It's got to be overwhelming.
Kids aren't immune to all that. They take it in, try to make sense of it, and it can lead to fear, anxiety, even grief.
And it's not just the big stuff. Kids experience loss personally, too. A grandparent dying, a pet, a friend, even someone at school. That's got to be so hard to deal with, especially when you're young.
Absolutely. It's crucial that we, as adults, make it okay for them to talk about it. Let them ask questions, grieve in a healthy way.
Even if we don't have all the answers, just being there, listening, empathizing, that can make a huge difference.
Offering support, letting them know their feelings are valid, and just being present.
Sometimes it's as simple as that. Just being there, letting them know they're not alone.
That's a powerful message in Grammy Spoon, I think. The importance of connection when you're dealing with loss.
It reminds us that even when things are really tough, there's still light, the love and support of people around us.
And grief, even though it can feel so lonely, it's something we all experience. It connects us.
This book handles such a complex, sensitive topic in such a simple, honest way.
The author's a great storyteller. They capture what it's like to be a kid dealing with grief, and they don't shy away from the hard parts.
And they make it engaging. Vivid images, sensory details, characters you can relate to.
And it's not just for kids. Anyone who's lost someone can connect with this book.
It's a reminder that grief is universal. And even with death, there's still beauty, still meaning to be found in life.
Those connections we make, the memories, they stay with us, even after someone's gone.
That's beautifully said. And it brings us back to that question we asked. How do objects and rituals help us connect with those we've lost?
They're a link to the past, a way to keep those memories alive, to honor the person.
And they can bring comfort, help us find meaning when we're grieving.
It's about creating a memory that lives on, carrying those we love with us, even though they're not physically here.
And realizing that even with death, there's still beauty, love, connection in the world.
It's a reminder. Life is precious. And even though we all face loss, those bonds we have with loved ones, they stay with us. They shape who we are.
This deep dive has been really insightful. We've explored the different layers of Grammy's spoon, talked about how kids grieve, even touched on the author's own experiences. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with something to think about. We've talked about objects, rituals, but what about stories? How do the stories we tell, the memories, our shared experiences, how do those keep the people we've lost alive in our hearts?
That's such a good question. It really gets at what it means to remember someone, doesn't it? Objects, rituals, those are important. But yeah, it's the stories, the laughter, all those little moments, those are what keep their memory alive.
Yeah, it's like you're creating this whole tapestry of their life. Each story, each memory adds another thread.
And those stories, they change over time, just like, how we understand the person changes.
Right, we might remember things differently as we get older. Or we hear news stories from other people who knew them.
Exactly. It keeps their memory alive, lets them keep growing in our minds, even though they're not here anymore.
So it's not just about preserving the past. It's about connecting those stories to now, into the future.
Passing them down to younger generations, letting them get to know the people who came before, is how we keep their spirit alive.
Like passing a torch, keeping those memories burning bright.
And every time we tell those stories, we're not just remembering them, we're sharing a part of ourselves too, our own connection to them.
That's a beautiful way to think about it. It creates this sense of continuity. Like, even though death separates us, those bonds we have, they go beyond time and space.
And those bonds shape who we are, even after they're gone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Grammy's spoon, we want to encourage everyone listening. Think about the stories you carry with you, the memories that make you who you are, and how you keep those you've lost alive in your heart. Maybe it's an object, a ritual, or just sharing their stories.
Whatever it is, may those memories bring you comfort, remind you of the power of love.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation. It's amazing how a children's book can spark so much reflection. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.